So I'm Chris Merwin, Christopher Merwin or Professor Merwin, but I go by Chris. I am a sixth-year doctoral candidate in the philosophy department and an instructor, and I'm the current Dean's Teaching Fellow to Emory's writing program. So I was born in Panama. In a joke I like to tell is I was born in a place that no longer exists. At one time I was dating an East German woman, and I asked her and said, what's it like to have been born in some place that's no longer there? And she said, I don't know, you tell me. So I was born in the Panama Canal Zone, which used to be a dependency of the United States, but was given over to the Panamanians in, I think, 2001. My father was a diplomat, and he was a Latin America expert specialist. He was a senior CIA officer, so I grew up kind of moving around all over Latin America, telling me stories about what my dad did, most of which weren't true. And yeah, I grew up in Panama, Ecuador, Honduras, Bolivia. I always forget one. I finally moved to the States when I was, I think, 16, which is a very confusing experience, because you know how junior high and high school, it's all about what clique you're in, and I was still watching like TV from 10 years before, because that's all we had. So it was a very interesting, very fast kind of process to learn the culture that I was actually born from, but had never really lived in. Yeah, and then I went to school. I did my undergraduate in Boston, and that was a super exciting time to be in Boston. It was a great experience. I didn't originally major in philosophy. So interestingly, I got an ROTC scholarship, which is how I ended up in the military. And the ROTC scholarship was for the lowest major that they could possibly give you. The military ranks majors according to how much they need and what they want, and the lowest one was English. And so the Army gave me a scholarship, almost a full ride, to study English. But I decided instead, I'm going to do political science. So I remember my first semester, somehow, I don't even know how this happened, I took a political theory class, and I absolutely loved it. It was so amazing. It was so interesting and thought-provoking. So I went to the professor, who it turned out was my advisor, and was like, I want to take more political theory. This stuff is really cool. And he was like, okay, well, there's these other political theory classes, or you could take one of the political theory classes in the philosophy department. I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so by the end of my freshman year, I had taken every political theory class that the university had offered for undergrads. I don't know how they let me get away with that. And so finally, at the end of the year, I went back to my advisor and I said, I really want to take more theory. What can I do? And he looked at me very stern-faced and he said, you need to become a philosophy major. And so I did. And that began my love affair with philosophy. And so I was going to go through my military service, finish it out, and then I was going to move to Germany. So I got out and I drove my little car across the desert to Austin, Texas, to get away from the Army. And I talked to my best friend, who was living in Prague at the time. And I said, I want to go to Germany, but how do I do it? And he said, well, become an English teacher. I was like, what? He was like, everywhere in Europe needs English teachers. I thought, okay, how do I become an English teacher? I was like, I don't know, take a course, do something. So I researched online, and in the meantime, I moved to Austin, Texas, and began tutoring at the University of Texas at Austin. And did a bunch of research and realized that, in fact, I could get this certification from Cambridge University to teach English. And then I packed my bags. I got accepted to this program. I remember I packed 2 suitcases, and that was all I was going to have for the next however many years, and 2 books, which is a huge deal for me. One was a philosophy book, and one was a work of literature. And I got on a plane, and 5.5 years later, I came back to the United States. In the interim, I lived in Budapest, Hungary. I taught there for a little while. Funnily enough, the only thing I remember in Hungarian is how to say shoe store and sex shop, because they're all next to each other. Some strange reason, all across Budapest, and Hungarian's a really difficult language. All across Budapest, there were always shoe stores next to sex shops, and they're everywhere. So I brought home very little useful Hungarian. I can ask someone if they know where a shoe store is. So packed my bags, and like $200 in my account, moved to Berlin, and then spent the next 3.5 to 4 years living in Berlin, learning German. I eventually started taking university courses in German, and while there, I also began teaching English professionally, which is an interesting thing because it's a weird system in Germany. When you first get there, you're affiliated with a school. It doesn't pay well at all. It's like €12 an hour. But then you start getting these side jobs of schools offering you more intense things. And I remember my last job in Berlin was making something ungodly, like €40 an hour, to teach tax English to German lawyers, which I have no background in taxation law or anything like that. I can just read the IRS website. So I taught them all about the IRS, which was kind of interesting. And they would take me out to these like super fancy lawyerly lunches, which was fun. So after that, I decided, I was like, well, I'm kind of getting towards the end of my time in Germany. So kind of like with Germany, I got on a train with my 2 bags, and by this point I had collected many more books, and shipped those to Paris, got on a train and rode to Paris. I stayed in Paris for about 2 years, which was really interesting. It's a beautiful city, but I also realized that it was really time to start looking at grad schools. I had done my time in Germany, I'd done my time in France, I was fluent in both French and German, and that it really was time to go to school. I wasn't happy doing business, and so I applied to the New School for Social Research in New York City, which has a great long legacy, and was accepted. Did my master's there, and so I spent 2.5 years in New York doing my master's, and then applied to PhD programs, including Emory. And then one summer, the last summer that I was in New York, I went to a kind of what we jokingly refer to as philosophy summer camp, which is this fantastic 3-week program in Italy, this tiny walled town in Italy, where anywhere from 30 to 50 philosophers get together with some of the most renowned philosophers in the world, giving workshops and talks and meetings and stuff. And while there, I met this wonderful woman, and over the Italian hills and sunsets and wine, in the 3 weeks, the intense weeks we had there, we decided that we wanted to pursue a further relationship. And she was like, I got this grant to go to Germany to go do some work. How'd you like to come? I was like, well, I'm not doing anything. I'm waiting to hear back from Emory. Sure. So we went back to Germany. We lived there she was there for a year. I was there for 9 months before I got the yes from Emory, and then decided to accept the offer. It'd be crazy not to. And now she and I are getting married next February.
Oh, congrats!